The Apocryphon of John is a 2nd century Scythian Gnostic text attributed to John the Apostle, and it claims to record a secret revelation given to him by the resurrected Jesus after the Ascension. Framed as a Gnostic alternative to the Book of Acts, it presents what feels like a hidden version of early Christian history, a radically different take on the Christian story that unfolds in private rather than in public preaching. In this text, Jesus returns not to perform miracles, but to deliver secret knowledge, a revelation about the true nature of God, the cosmos, and humanity's divine origin. This hidden gospel was influential enough to be condemned as dangerous heresy by the church father Irenaeus before the year 180, attacked in ancient polemics against heresies and marked as a threat to emerging orthodoxy. After that, it was largely lost for over 1,500 years, as if erased from history, buried and forgotten. Only in the 20th century was it rediscovered in the sands of Egypt through 4th century Coptic manuscripts, most famously among the Nag Hammadi library, bringing back to light this complex and controversial vision of humanity's divine origins. The fact that we now possess 4 separate surviving manuscripts in both long and short versions shows how significant and widespread this text once was within early Gnostic communities. At some point in your life, quietly or violently, you may have wondered if the story you were given about God, about the world, about who you are, is really all there is. This is exactly where the Apocryphon of John begins, not with calm certainty, but with the feeling of being cracked open from the inside, as if the old answers have stopped working and something in you refuses to pretend anymore. The story opens after the crucifixion and the ascension, at a time when the followers of Jesus are supposed to be comforted and secure, yet instead they stand in a fog of shock, grief and confusion. And at the center of that fog is John, a disciple who has seen miracles, eaten with his teacher, heard the public sermons, and still, underneath, carries a fragile, trembling faith that has not yet been tested by the full weight of doubt. The text describes a moment when this fragile faith is struck hard, not by some great cosmic event, but by a simple human encounter, something uncomfortably familiar. A religious expert, a Pharisee named Aramanos, confronts John and his companions and speaks to that most painful suspicion in any believer's heart, telling them that the Nazarene misled them, that he lied, that he closed their hearts and ripped them away from the ways of their ancestors. And in those words, John suddenly feels himself suspended between 2 worlds, no longer full. Lie at home in the faith he grew up in, yet not fully grounded in this new path either, like a person who has stepped off the shore but has not yet found solid ground beneath the water. The accusation is not just about doctrine, it is about identity, about the fear that you have given your life to the wrong story, and that fear pushes John past ordinary sadness into a deep spiritual anguish that the text does not try to tidy up or fix quickly. And instead of arguing, instead of defending his beliefs, John does something that many people secretly dream of, but rarely allow themselves to do. He turns away from the arguments, away from the temple and the noise, and walks out toward a deserted, rocky mountain place, leaving behind familiar structures and stepping into an outer wilderness that mirrors the inner wilderness he is already carrying. And there, alone, without a crowd to perform for, his inner turmoil finally condenses into clear questions he can no longer keep buried. Who really is the Savior? How was he chosen? Why was he sent into this world? Who is his Father? What kind of realm waits for us on the other side of death? Is there truly a higher world beyond this one? Or are we just comforting ourselves with stories? These are not abstract theological puzzles in the text. They are the kind of midnight questions that appear when the room is dark and the phone is silent, and you suddenly feel the weight of being alive. And the narrative suggests that for John, as for you, The pain does not come from having no answers at all, but from sensing that even the beautiful teachy, NGs, he has already heard, only point to something further, something hidden, a reality that seems to stand just beyond the horizon of his understanding, as if he has been told that this world is a reflection of an imperishable realm, yet the nature of that imperishable realm remains veiled and unnamed. It is exactly at the point where his questions feel most raw and unanswered that the story shifts, and the text says that the heavens open, the whole of creation shines with a light from above, and the world trembles, not as a punishment, but as a sign that the invisible has pressed itself into visibility. And in this trembling moment, John is no longer simply a confused man on a mountain. He becomes the witness of a vision that the text invites you to step inside with him. Before him appears a being of pure light whose presence is so strange and fluid that it refuses to be pinned down into any single human category. The vision moves like living light, now appearing as a child, then as an old man, then as a young man, all three at once, each form appearing through the other. And the text lingers on this shifting image to make you feel how this presence does not fit our usual boxes of age, gender, or role. It is as if time itself has become transparent, and you are looking at something that was never bound to it in the first place. The first thing this being does is simple and kind. It calms John's fear, because terror always arrives when the old structure of meaning begins to crack. And then, once John can breathe again, the being speaks a sentence that quietly unhooks the usual picture of God that many of us have been given, saying, "I am the Father, I am the Mother, I am the Son." And with that one line, the text introduces a divine presence that is not only masculine, not only distant, but holds within itself both mother and father, both giving and receiving, both transcendent source and intimate child, inviting you to imagine that the ground of everything might be a living mystery that includes what we have learned to separate. This is not presented as a dogma you must accept. It is told as the way John experienced the sacred in that moment, and in that vision, the feminine is not an afterthought or an ornament. She stands as an equal face of the divine, and the holy appears as an androgynous, many-sided life rather than a single throne occupied by a solitary, distant king. The luminous presence then explains why it has come, not to prove itself right in an argument, but to offer what the text calls Gnosis, a kind of inner knowing that does not cancel faith or good works, but moves beneath them. The kind of knowing that can answer the questions tearing John open, and can also speak to the part of you that feels strangely out of place in this world, as if you were made for a different sky. This Gnosis, the being says, is meant to liberate those who carry a certain spark, the immovable race of perfect humanity, which you might hear not as a literal bloodline, but as a way of naming anyone who, like John, refuses to settle for a life lived in sleep. At this point, the narrative widens, as if the camera pulls back from the mountain and lifts above the ear. And the voice begins a revelation that does not just address John's personal crisis, but reaches all the way back to the beginning, to the very source from which everything flows. And the text calls this source the One, or the invisible spirit, and tries, with the clumsy tools of human language, to point toward a reality that cannot be contained by human ideas, saying that the One exists in a kind of radiant solitude, not lonely, not lacking, but so complete that nothing outside it exists to judge it or define it. A presence described as pure, uncontaminated light that no eye can stare into, not because it is hostile, but because there is no separate viewer standing opposite it. It is not a god among other gods, not a person in the sky, and the text even warns the listener not to think of it as a god, the way that word is usually used, as if to say whatever image you are holding it is still too small, because this source does not merely have qualities like goodness or life or light. It is the root from which those words take their meaning. It is what those words are trying to point to when they reach beyond themselves. And so any attempt to describe it in measurements, in categories, even in the highest religious language, will always fall short. This picture of an unknowable, self-sufficient origin is not given to crush you with distance, but to create a sharp contrast with the tangled, painful world you wake up in each day. A world in which people forget who they are and hurt one another and feel abandoned. And the story quietly plants a question in the middle of that contrast. If the deepest source is this whole unbroken light, then how did we end up here, in a place that feels broken, unjust and chaotic? Why does the world feel like a maze when the origin is described as such simplicity? And if that invisible fullness is real, what went wrong along the way? Rather than answering immediately, the vision moves into a kind of mythic memory, explaining that from this silent one, reality begins to unfold, not with a bang or a command shouted into a void, but like thoughts rising in a mind, like a song that gradually reveals its notes. And the first of these emanations is described as a feminine presence, a divine thought called Barbelo, the first power, the clear image of the invisible spirit, standing before it as its own self-awareness. And the text clothes her in many names to help you feel how large she is, calling her the universal womb, the mother and the father, the first human and the one who holds all potential within herself, blurring again the lines that human culture draws between male and female, spirit and matter, inner and outer. Barbelo in this story becomes the bridge between the unreachable mystery of the one and the unfolding of all the worlds that will follow. And as she speaks with the invisible spirit, more emanations step forward, not as separate gods, but as living qualities of this original mind: foreknowledge, incorruptibility, endless life, truth, forming together what the text calls the fullness, the Pleroma, a realm of clear, stable awareness where every power works in harmony. And from the loving gaze between he source, and Barbelo arises another figure, the self-generated Christ, anointed with goodness and given the role of shaping what will come, speaking the word that calls further powers into expression, until, finally, a luminous human shape named Adamas stands in the first realm, a picture of humanity as it is in its purest possibility, mind awake, heart unbroken, fully at home in the light. The text lingers on this image of a world in perfect inner balance, not as a fantasy to escape into, but as a pattern you can feel faintly echoing inside yourself whenever you have sensed that your life is meant for something more whole than what you have experienced so far. And just as you begin to settle into the beauty of that harmony, the story lets you sense a tremor at the edge of it, hinting that this balance will not remain untouched, that something within the very realm of powers will move out of alignment, and that in this movement, the strange, heavy world you know will begin. And it is precisely at the height of that luminous harmony, when everything seems ordered and transparent within the fullness, that a single movement of desire shifts the balance and opens the door to everything that feels fractured in your own experience of the world. The text tells of an aeon named Sophia, whose name means wisdom, and yet in this moment her longing moves ahead of the quiet rhythm that binds the divine realm together, for she desires to bring forth something from herself, alone, to create an image without the consent of the invisible spirit and without the balancing embrace of her enter part. And the story does not present this as simple evil, but as a restless impulse, the kind that rises in any being who wants to see what they can do on their own. Because Sophia carries immense power, her thought does not vanish into nothing, it takes form, but what emerges is not the clear reflection she imagined. It is distorted, incomplete, shaped by isolation, rather than communion. And the text describes the result in startling imagery. A being unlike the luminous powers above, bearing the face of a lion and the body of a serpent, eyes flashing like lightning yet blind to the source from which he sprang. This is Yaldabaoth, born of wisdom's impatience and horrified by what she has brought forth. Sophia casts him away into a distant cloud, placing a throne within it so that none of the higher realms will see her mistake. Yet in shielding him from the light, she also seals him in ignorance. And here the myth turns inward, suggesting that what is cut off from its origin begins to believe it is the origin, that isolation breeds delusion. Yaldabaoth grows powerful in his obscurity, drawing unknowingly on the spark he has taken from his mother. And in the darkness of his self-made realm, he fashions companions, the archons, rulers who mirror his confusion, and together they shape a world that imitates the higher pattern but lacks its clarity, a dim reflection, a twilight copy animated by stolen light. And standing in the center of this shadow kingdom, Yaldabaoth surveys what he has made and declares with fierce certainty, "I am a jealous god, and there is no god but me." A sentence that rings with authority, yet trembles with ignorance, because he speaks it without knowing the fullness from which he descended. The text quietly inverts familiar images here, not to mock or to attack, but to unsettle the surface of belief and invite you to consider the possibility that the powers governing the visible world may not be the ultimate source, that what shouts the loudest about its sovereignty may in fact be the most cut off from the deeper ground. While this counterfeit cosmos takes shape, Sophia looks upon the consequences of her solitary act and feels remorse. And her turning of heart is heard in the higher realms, stirring the fullness into compassionate response. And from that compassion, a subtle intervention begins, not with thunder, but with a whisper. A voice echoes from the Pleroma, proclaiming that the true human exists, the Son of Man. And in the dim waters of his realm, Yaldabaoth and his archons see reflected above them a luminous image of a perfect spiritual human, radiant and whole, and envy rises in them like heat, because they sense in that image a power greater than their own. Desiring to harness it, they resolve to create a being in its likeness, saying, "Let us make a man according to the image of God, so that his light may illuminate us." And here the myth slows to a strange, almost mechanical rhythm, describing how a host of rulers and their forces construct a human body piece by piece, each contributing a part until a complete form lies before them, intricate, impressive, yet lifeless, an empty shell, a prison waiting for a prison. This moment carries a quiet ache, because it mirrors how easily structures can be built without spirit, systems without soul, bodies without awareness. And seeing an opportunity to reclaim the lost light, the higher powers whisper a suggestion into Yaldabaoth's mind, advising him that if he wishes his creation to live, he must breathe his spirit into its face. Convinced that he is giving of his own essence, he leans down and exhales, and in that breath, the spark he stole from Sophia passes into the human form, and suddenly the body stirs, eyes opening with a depth that startles its creators. Because Adam now shines with a radiance that surpasses them, animated by a fragment of the very fullness they have never known. In this image, the text plants a radical idea that within the human being, beneath confusion and fear, there rests a divine spark not created by the rulers of this world, but older than them. And when the archons realize they have been outwitted, that their creation carries a light they cannot control, jealousy grips them, and they cast the luminous Adam down into the densest regions of matter, attempting to bury the very brilliance they hoped to exploit. Yet the story refuses to leave humanity abandoned in that fall, and from the higher realms a helper is sent, a luminous feminine presence called epinoia, meaning insight, also named life, who hides within Adam as an inner companion, a quiet remembering woven into his being, a guide that cannot be seen by the rulers but can be felt in moments of clarity, in flashes of conscience, in the subtle sense that you are more than the roles imposed on you. Threatened by this hidden superiority, the Archons place Adam in a garden of their own design, a counterfeit paradise where the trees are rooted in deception and their fruit carries forgetfulness, offering him the tree of life within their system, a promise of endless survival under their rule, while concealing the true tree of knowledge, which in this telling is not a source of sin, but the embodied light of Epinoia herself, the living principle of Gnosis. They forbid this knowledge not because it would corrupt him, but because it would awaken him, because if Adam were to look up toward the fullness and recognize his own naked radiance, the illusion of their authority would begin to crack. In a surprising turn, the Savior reveals to John that he himself took part in this moment, appearing in the form of an eagle and encouraging Adam to taste the fruit, reframing the so-called fall as the first movement of awakening, the first refusal to remain asleep in a garden of comfortable ignorance. Enraged by this shift, Yaldabaoth attempts to drain the light from Adam, drawing out a portion of his power and shaping from it the form of a woman, Eve. Yet when Adam sees her, the hidden insight within him stirs fully, and he recognizes in her not a threat, but a reflection, declaring that she is bone of his bones and flesh of his flesh. And in that recognition, the veil thins, and the text describes him rising from the dark intoxication of forgetfulness into a clearer awareness of who he is. Unable to comprehend the deeper design unfolding before him, the chief ruler responds with anger, cursing the ground and asserting dominance, casting the pair out of his false paradise and clothing them in heavier matter, beginning what the myth calls humanity's long exile, not as a punishment from a loving source, but as the consequence of awakening within a system that fears awakened beings. Yet even in exile the spark persists, and Adam, now carrying a measure of Gnosis, fathers a son named Seth, described as bearing the likeness of the perfect Son of Man from the fullness, and through Seth, a lineage is traced, not necessarily of blood but of awareness, those who carry within themselves the memory of their origin. Still, the rulers of the dim realm are not finished, and they compel humanity to drink from waters of forgetfulness, layering confusion upon confusion so that the divine spark becomes harder to perceive. And at this point, the narrative shifts into a more intimate dialogue, as John asks about the fate of the soul and the path that leads beyond this prison, and the Savior explains that not all souls meet the same end, that those who nurture the spirit of life within, who endure the pressures of the material world without surrendering their inner light, will eventually find rest, while those who remain bound to the artificial spirit fashioned by the rulers, entangled in ignorance and harm, are drawn back again and again into bodies, circling through births and deaths until knowledge finally pierces the fog. The text speaks of this cycle, not with cold judgment, but with a kind of sober clarity, saying that around and around it goes until the soul frees itself from forgetfulness through remembrance. And in this telling, salvation is less a reward handed down from above and more a process of awakening from within, a gradual reclaiming of what was always yours, even as a final warning lingers for those who glimpse this knowledge and then turn away from it deliberately, suggesting that to betray your own awakening hardens the prison walls around you. The path laid out here is not about blind belief or external performance, but about inner alignment, about refusing to let the counterfeit spirit define you, and the myth presses quietly against your own life, asking where you may have accepted the voice of the blind ruler as ultimate, where you have mistaken survival for fullness, and whether the restlessness you feel might actually be the hidden Epinoia calling you to remember. And it is that quiet remembering, that subtle stirring of epinoia within the human heart, that the rulers of the dim realm fear more than anything, because once a person begins to suspect that they carry a memory that does not belong to this world's architecture, control becomes fragile. The narrative returns to the cosmic stage and shows the archons tightening their grip, not only through brute force but through strategy, weaving structures so intricate that most souls never realize they are inside them. And the first of these structures is what the text calls fate, born from a distorted union with the fallen Sophia, a system of astrological determinism and rigid cycles that binds human life to time, to repeating patterns, commandments heavy enough to exhaust the spirit. Fate in this telling is not a neutral clockwork of stars, but a subtle architecture of confinement, persuading you that everything is already decided, that your impulses are written in the sky, that your limits are permanent, and under its influence many begin to mistake conditioning for destiny, forgetting that the spark within them does not belong to the turning of planets. When fate alone fails to secure obedience, the chief ruler attempts something more drastic, unleashing a great flood upon the world, not as a loving correction, but as a desperate act of erasure, a tyrant's attempt to reset a creation that is slipping beyond his control. And yet, even here the myth shifts the lens, suggesting that those who carry the inner remembrance are warned in advance, not merely to build a wooden vessel, but to shelter themselves in a cloud of light, a refuge of awareness that no external catastrophe can drown. The flood passes, the structures remain, and the archons craft what the text calls their most insidious invention, the artificial spirit, sending forces among humanity in disguise, appearing familiar, even intimate, slipping into relationships and daily routines, implanting a counterfeit impulse that magnifies greed, distraction, envy, and fear, encouraging the restless pursuit of gold, silver, status, and endless acquisition, so that a person grows old, chasing what never satisfies, and dies without ever having tasted their own depth. Through these layered mechanisms of fate, catastrophe, and inner distortion, the prison becomes. It's almost invisible, and perhaps this is the most unsettling suggestion of all, that captivity does not always feel like chains, that it can feel like normal life, busy, noisy, crowded with desires that seem natural. In response to this deepening confinement, the tone of the revelation changes, and the Savior begins to speak, not as a distant narrator, but in the first person, as a presence that descends into the very heart of the darkness, describing a journey into the central part of the prison, walking down into the thickest layers of forgetfulness without destroying the world itself. Because the aim is not annihilation, but awakening, this descent is portrayed as perilous, not in a physical sense, but in the sense of entering fully into human limitation, into doubt, into grief, into the places where the artificial spirit has woven its tightest knots, and from within those depths a voice calls out, simple and piercing, "Rise up from your deep sleep." The myth lingers on the image of a soul hearing this call, not triumphantly but with tears, weeping in the darkness as if a long-forgotten memory has suddenly returned, asking where this hope has come from and whether it can be trusted. And the answering voice does not threaten or command. It identifies itself as the remembrance of pure light, the thought of the Virgin Spirit, urging the soul to look inward and upward at once, to recall its origin not as an abstract doctrine, but as a living sensation of belonging to something vast and gentle. The process of salvation here unfolds as recognition rather than reward. As the awakened soul is lifted and sealed with what the text calls the light water of the 5 seals, an image that can be heard not only as ritual, but as a deep integration, a stabilizing of awareness so that death itself loses its terror, because what you are at your core is no longer confused with what can decay. In this hymn-like conclusion, the Christ figure is revealed less as a judge, weighing moral accounts, and more as a luminous memory entering a world that has forgotten itself. A presence that infiltrates systems of control, not to overthrow them with violence, but to ignite sparks within individuals, guiding them quietly back toward the fullness from which they emerged. The narrative never demands that you abandon your current beliefs, nor does it insist that this myth replace every other story you have known. But it plants a seed of suspicion toward any power that claims absolute authority while cutting you off from your own inner light. And it offers a different possibility, that beneath the noise of religion, politics, culture, and even your own habits, there is a more ancient current running through you, patient and persistent. As the revelation draws to a close, the Savior instructs John to write these things down and share them discreetly with those capable of receiving them, framing the entire vision as a sacred secret, not because it is elitist, but because not everyone is ready to question the architecture of their reality. And John descends from the mountain no longer paralyzed by doubt, but carrying a fire that does not burn outward in spectacle, it burns inward in clarity. The text leaves you not with a neat conclusion, but with an invitation suspended in the air, a sense that if there is even a fragment of truth in this mythic inversion, then your dissatisfaction, your recurring sense that something about the world feels off, might not be weakness but evidence of a spark remembering its origin. You are not told to reject the visible world, only to see it with new eyes, to notice where you have accepted the voice of the blind ruler as final, where you have confused survival with meaning, where the artificial spirit has whispered that you are small, accidental, bound. And perhaps the most urgent thread running through this ancient narrative is the idea that awakening is not guaranteed by time alone, that cycles can repeat indefinitely until something within you decides to remember, that the opportunity to rise from sleep is always present, yet never forced. And so there is a quiet immediacy in the story, as if it were being told not merely about John on a mountain centuries ago, but about you, here, in this moment, standing at the edge of your own inherited beliefs, sensing that beneath them there may be a deeper current calling. The Apocryphon does not close with applause or triumph. It closes with a stillness, with the image of a soul sealed in light, free not because the world has changed overnight, but because perception has shifted, because identity has been reclaimed from the counterfeit and returned to the fullness. And whether you take this as myth, symbol, or hidden memory, it leaves you with a question that refuses to fade. What if the prison is thinner than you think? And what if the voice calling you to wake up has been speaking softly inside you all along? As the revelation comes to its quiet close, the vision does not end in noise or triumph, but in a stillness that feels almost protective. The Savior leaves John not with spectacle, but with a trust placed gently in his hands, to write what he has seen, to guard it as something sacred, and to share it only with those ready to hear it. The mystery is not shouted into the streets. It is carried carefully, like a flame shielded from the wind. John descends, the mountain changed, not because the world has suddenly transformed, but because something inside him has settled into clarity. The confusion that once drove him upward has softened into a deeper knowing. And perhaps, in listening to this story, something similar has moved within you. The questions you have carried, the quiet unrest, the sense that there is more beneath the surface of things, none of it is accidental. You are not late. You are not lost. You have not been forgotten. If any part of this ancient vision felt strangely familiar, that recognition is enough for now. The path described here is not about force or urgency, but about remembrance unfolding in its own time. There is space to breathe. There is space to let what you have heard settle gently. And if this story continues to echo within you, there are other layers waiting to be explored just ahead. When I sit with this story, What stays with me is not a sense of rebellion, but a quiet turning inward, as if the text is less about overthrowing anything outside of us and more about uncovering something long buried within. To me, the Apocryphon of John feels like a mirror held up in low light, not forcing an answer, but inviting a deeper honesty about the parts of ourselves that feel displaced, restless, or half awake. I don't hear it as an attack on faith, but as a whispered question beneath faith. What if the divine is closer, more intimate, more intertwined with your own awareness than you were ever told? And I wonder how this story lands in you. Did any moment feel strangely familiar, as if it brushed against something you have sensed but never named? Did the image of the hidden spark, or the call to rise from sleep, echo in your own experience of moving through this world? I would genuinely love to hear how this journey felt from where you are standing right now. If one sentence from this vision lingered with you, or if one question surfaced in your heart while listening, share it in the comments below. You can even write something simple like, "I am remembering," if that resonates. And if this exploration spoke to you in some way, gently consider liking the video and subscribing so we can continue walking through these hidden layers together. Your voice, your reflection, your presence here is part of the unfolding.